Welcome to Everything with Everett. This is a talk show podcast hosted by Everett McConaughey from Boise, Idaho. The purpose of this production is to share thoughts, voices, and information to further a discussion on who we are as individuals, communities, and a global society. Everything with Everett is open to all topics of discussion: faith, science, history, finances, social issues, and, well, everything. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Visit everettpodcast.com for all the details.
Hey everybody, I'm back with you. Long time no talk, I know. So today, I want to kind of talk about something that we've all probably heard of, but never really, there's not a lot of conversations about it. It's probably not that big of a thing now compared to what it used to be in maybe our parents' generation in the 70s and before that, 40s to 70s. But it still is something to be aware of, and certainly a important conversation that is worth having. That's the premise of this podcast and the reason it got started. So I want to talk about asbestos. And you may know that asbestos is a very harmful chemical. It can cause cancers. It is, let me pull up some resources here. So some key factors about asbestos, just to get us started. Exposure to asbestos happens in occupational settings and in homes throughout the U.S. Asbestos exposure is the primary cause of mesothelioma cancer. This cancer forms in the lining of the lungs and abdomen. Other types of cancer caused by asbestos include lung, ovarian, and laryngeal cancer. Exposure may cause scarring of the lungs or asbestosis, basically inflammation of the asbestos, I guess. And the U.S. companies produced thousands of products containing asbestos until the 1980s. So for those of you millennials like myself, this product really fell out of popular usage just before we were born. So things that were made with this product, naturally forming fiber, still exist and are worth knowing how to avoid so that you don't get sick. So something I remember seeing a couple years ago, and that's kind of what prompted this whole thing, was I remember seeing an advertisement. And it was a box with a beautiful cabin winter scene, some nice pine trees, smoke wafting out the chimney. And the front of the package says, asbestos, pure white, fireproof. And then it says snow. Looks like real snow. Cleanest, whitest, brightest. And guess what? It was marketed to customers at home to sprinkle. Yes, you can join me in going, what the hell? Sprinkle on your Christmas village. Decorate or frost a wreath or a Christmas tree, or your imagination can take you wherever. But yes, sprinkle it around your children. Asbestos. It looks like snow. If only we could go back and give out some posthumous Darwin Awards. So here's some history about this fake snow made from asbestos. The source of this article that I'm reading is asbestosproservices.com. It's from 2018, and I will link to it in the podcast description for you. So it says, in the early half of the 20th century, asbestos was widely used as Christmas decor because of its white, fluffy appearance. But that was before it was recognized as a major risk factor for an aggressive form of cancer known as mesothelioma. Asbestos was once marketed as artificial snow and sprinkled on trees and wreaths and ornaments. Although those products have not been produced for many years, the oldest decorations that we pass down from one generation to the next may still have small amounts of asbestos. So that's why you need to be careful about what, you get from grandma. Make sure that you don't just touch it and then go handle some holiday food or keep the grandkids away from it. We have those beautiful hand-me-down keepsakes that we remember growing up with, especially if you grew up in the 40s and you got some of mom's old decorations. If there's, white flaky snow on it, it could be asbestos. Just be aware. The most famous asbestos snow scene was used during the filming of The Wizard of Oz in 1939, the classic with Judy Garland that became the most watched film in history. There is a scene in the movie where snow made from asbestos falls on Dorothy and her friends, awakening from the spell cast by the Wicked Witch of the West. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the poppy seed. Or the poppy flower scene where they all fall asleep in the field. And the witch is like, poppies! And they fall asleep and the snow wakes them up. That is asbestos falling on their face. And guess what? They breathe in and I pray to God nobody got asbestos in their lungs. And I hope it was only one take. So yeah, if you want to, show your kids something, show them the Wizard of Oz scene with asbestos falling from the ceiling. This article has the picture that I just mentioned to you about the box of snow for your Christmas village. Underneath it, it says, the image above depicts a real item sold to consumers in the mid-20th century. This product was manufactured by National Tinsel Manufacturing Company and was sold in the late 1940s through the 1950s, Rich said. And he told them, this brand actually contains, I'm going to probably butcher this, amphibole, AMPHIBOLE, asbestos, and then it has in quotes, amosite, which is very toxic. And I'm actually going to go on to another resource about asbestos, and amosite asbestos that they used for your Christmas village, sprinkle onto Judy Garland for Dorothy's scene. It is the most toxic form of asbestos. So not only, is asbestos bad, we were very carefree about the most dangerous version and, sprinkle it around the Christmas village and pray to God that children don't die. Generally speaking, asbestos was used by tens of millions of tons for nearly over a century and a half in modern history for a wide variety of applications, mostly due to its fire resistance. Insulating properties, durability, strength, inertness could be woven and was cheap and abundant. Do you notice a theme in America? Cheap and abundant. We don't like to pay a lot of money, and we don't like to, have things that are finite. We want things that are, inherently evil for a low cost. Easy to get. Quick to throw away. God bless the USA. Anyway, I'm feeling on one today. So I will link that if you want to read that. That's a really cool thing to see. The box of the fireproof village snow. So then this next one is an amazing website. It has tons of stuff that if you are wanting to do more reading, I would highly recommend. It's called asbestos.com. And they've got a lot of resources. Like if you feel like you have symptoms of mesothelioma, the cancer, or you worked in an industry where you suspect you were exposed to asbestos, they have resources for you to talk to somebody, get testing, get health treatments. Great resource. So again, I will link both of these resources to the podcast description. So this website has the key factors that I just read earlier about the exposure to asbestos happening in occupational settings in homes throughout the U.S., all that jazz. So continuing on their website, I thought it would be interesting to kind of let you know where else asbestos was located. So they start off with the headline, "What is asbestos?" Asbestos is a carcinogenic mineral. It consists of flexible fiber resistant to heat, electricity, and corrosion. These qualities make the mineral useful in many products. They also contribute to asbestos exposure toxicity. Construction materials contain asbestos because it is an effective insulator. Asbestos in cloth, paper, cement, plastic, and other materials make them stronger. Basically, it sounds like asbestos was kind of like the original fiberglass. It helped add fiber to things and give it strength. Inhaling or ingesting asbestos causes fibers to become trapped in the body. Over decades, trapped asbestos fibers can cause inflammation, scarring, and cancer. Keep in mind, your lungs are a wet environment. So when those fibers go in, you can't just cough them up and hack them out. They stick to your lung lining, and then your body reacts and encapsulates them and whatever. They're there for life. So, the older I get, the more I realize that we really do need to be wearing masks. Like when you're doing stuff and there's dust in the air and, who knows what's flying around, because, you can get a little dust in your lungs and think you cough it out, but the really toxic stuff, if it was in that dust, it's going to stick to the inside of your lungs and you can't get rid of that. Like you can't just swallow some water and wash it into your system and hopefully out. Like your lungs are a cul-de-sac of air pockets. So common uses of asbestos, again, it's found in auto parts. Again, these are before 1980. Now these industries don't use them, but this is where you have to keep in mind that these items made before 1980 have a higher chance of having this. And if they were made before 1980, but like installed later, they still could have it. So you have to be extra cautious and know where you're getting these supplies from. So some older vehicles, auto parts, I read that apparently a lot of like paneling and some of the early like internal plastic components of vehicles had asbestos woven in them. Building materials, cement, electrical parts, and insulation. Asbestos can be found in thousands of consumer, industrial, and commercial products. Mesothelioma is almost exclusively caused by asbestos exposure. Asbestos also causes progressive lung disease called asbestosis. So that's what that was earlier. Trying to figure out how I want to go through this page, because they've got little, tangents you can go off to the side and read more about this and that. And I don't want to get too off into the weeds and then have to be like, pardon me, will I find my way back? Types of asbestos. The Asbestos Hazard Emergency Response Act of 1986 legally recognizes six types of asbestos. These all fall into two categories. Amphibole, 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 and serpentine, like a snake. Amphibole asbestos fibers are straight and jagged. Different types of this like branch of asbestos are known as crocodilite, crocodolite, amosite, that was the most dangerous one, and anthophyllite, anthophyllite, and then tremolite, tremolite, and then actinolite, actinolite. I like spelling in case you want to figure out how to say it yourself. Serpentine asbestos. Serpentine asbestos fibers are curly, crystotile, crysotile. I feel like we're in a spelling bee. Also known as white asbestos, is the only form of this type of asbestos. The 6 main types of asbestos, it has pictures, so you might want to see this, of the crocodilite, the tremolite, amosite, very straight and stringy versus fluffy and chaotic of the different fibers. So kind of interesting to see what those actually look like under a microscope. Where does asbestos come from? Asbestos mainly comes from Russia, Kazakhstan, and China. The toxic mineral was once mined throughout North America. So you probably still could have products with asbestos if it comes from Russia, Kazakhstan, or China. I'm gathering and hoping that America does not mine asbestos anymore. Most commercial asbestos deposits contain 5 to 6% asbestos. Some deposits, such as Coalinga, Coalinga deposit in California, contain 50% or more asbestos. So it's something that you mine out of the ground, just like, coal, diamonds, steel. We like to dig up the earth. Asbestos-related diseases. Scientific studies have linked asbestos exposure to several diseases, including cancers. Mesothelioma is a type of cancer almost only caused by asbestos exposure. Asbestos also causes asbestosis-related lung cancer, ovarian cancer, and laryngeal cancer. So all cancers along the path of ingestion or intake. So laryngeal, that's going to be your neck, your larynx, voice box. Lung cancer, obviously at the end of the air intake. Ovarian cancer, I'm guessing that's going to be like a side effect of the chemical going. I'm not even going to try to think about how asbestos gets down there. Anywho, moving on. So other asbestos-related diseases include asbestosis, that was that lung one, pleural effusions, pleural plaques, pleuritis, diffuse pleural thickening, and COPD. That's like that chronic bronchitis inflammation stuff. They've got, again, this website has resources to find a specialist for treatment. Great article to look at. I'm going to continue on it. I'm just reminding you, like, this is a really good backed resource, asbestos.com. All right. Asbestos exposure risks. The highest asbestos exposure risk is through occupational exposure to the toxic mineral. These exposures are highest in blue-collar jobs. Schools, older homes, and the military all pose a risk of exposure. People who live with workers who handle asbestos products may risk secondhand exposure. Interesting little story by a RN named Karen Selby. Asbestos kills nearly 40,000 Americans each year from malignant mesothelioma, lung cancer, and other related diseases. The U.S. is the only developed country that has not fully banned the carcinogen. Oh my God. Are you sensing another theme? We don't ban things that we can definably argue are killing us. But yes, let's talk about Christian values and how precious life is. As long as they're not drag queens, right? Asbestos-related occupations. The Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry detailed exposure between 1940 and 1979. Its record showed about 27 million workers were exposed to aerosolized asbestos products. Now, about 1.3 million construction and industry workers remain at risk. These products didn't go away. So, office buildings, things built before we banned putting it into products, still have asbestos. So if you're going to remodel the house, check for asbestos. Also check for lead paint. But that's going to be another podcast, I'm sure. But these things still exist. And as long as they stay entombed, you're fine. But the second you go rooting around and trying to, tear something up and it gets airborne into dust, that's when you start risking your health and your family's health. And, it sucks to hire a professional to have these mitigation measures taken to limit exposure. And it's going to, double or increase the cost of your project. But it's worth it because you don't want to save, $2,000 on the remodel, do it yourself, and then what? You die a premature death through mesothelioma because, your fixer-upper had asbestos fibers hanging around? Regulations have reduced the risk of exposure in the workplace. A degree of risk remains in many occupations, but certain jobs still present serious risk of exposure to asbestos today. Asbestos manufacturing high-risk occupations include, now there's two columns. I'm going to start with the historically high risk and then move on to still high risk. So historically high risk, presumably these are now occupations that the risk isn't as prevalent as it was. Mining, construction, manufacturing, shipbuilding, electricity generation, heavy industry, and military service. And then still high risk for exposure, automotive repair, chloralkali production, not sure what that is, CHLORALKALI, chloralkali production. Who knows? Let me hang on. For those of you that know me, I like to Google things. The chloralkali process is an industrial process for the electrolysis of sodium chloride solutions in the technology used to produce chlorine. Is one of the in which electricity is passed through a aqueous solution of sodium chloride or brine, which decomposes to form sodium hydroxide. It is called so because products formed in this process are chlorine and sodium hydroxide. So maybe you're making chlorine like for sanitization? Interesting. Building and equipment maintenance. Again, these things were insulators, wrapping of pipes, electrical, the past electricity generation. These were insulating fibers. So possibly, fabric encased electrical wires is a very common thing. So if you have old wiring in your house, it could be wrapped in asbestos fabric. So, these things are aging and become brittle and more likely to break off and become dust and get into your lungs. So you have to be very careful and make sure that you're not exposing yourself to these carcinogen and diseases that they cause. So again, building and equipment maintenance, still high risk. Renovation and demolition, I've been saying that. Firefighting, sheet gasket use, and oil field break block repair. So yeah, like these fibers are still present, and if you're having to work, in an area or on something that has had these used for a long time, they're still present. The U.S. military used asbestos from 1930 to the 1970s. Asbestos was especially common in Navy ships. Its use caused veterans to develop the bulk of asbestos-related diseases. Family members of veterans and other asbestos industry workers also risk secondhand exposure. This type of exposure when workers bring home fibers on their hair, skin, or clothes. So if you work or have a spouse that works in a very potentially dangerous environment, it is smart and beneficial to have them, change their clothes before they come home, practice decontamination procedures, take off your clothes, put them straight into the washing machine, wash them separately. But don't, just come in and hug the family and commiserate about the day. It's just not worth it. Living near an asbestos contaminated mine or processing facility risks environmental exposure. Asbestos industry work sites have existed across the United States. One notable landmark is Grand Central Terminal in New York. One of the worst environmental disasters in U.S. history is the Superfund site in Libby, Montana. Vermiculite mining contained traces of asbestos that contaminated the surrounding area for miles. This led to deaths of hundreds of Libby residents. Asbestos products. Products found in renovation or demolition work cause the most exposure. Old buildings that contain legacy asbestos products pose the largest risk. Here is a 1-minute, 12-second video. Again, you can view this on asbestos.com. It's a gentleman, not seeing his name. Oh, Tim Povtak, Povtak, discussing what is the legacy of asbestos.
You may hear people talk about legacy asbestos, and that's the biggest problem with asbestos today. When you hear legacy asbestos, that's asbestos that has been in older buildings, older commercial, residential buildings, structures, in the cement, in your roof, in the insulation in your roof that's 20 years old. Legacy asbestos is the biggest problem. That's what was left behind from in the 60s and 70s when everyone's homes were built with asbestos. All products were built with asbestos back then, and it still remains. And now as it ages, that's when it becomes, you inhale it or you ingest it because it's in the air. You can't get away from it. And that's what you really have to be careful about. It's not so much in new products today. New products today, very few are actually made with asbestos anymore. It's the older products. It's the products that have been around a long time. That's what you really have to watch out for. That's why we call it legacy asbestos.
So very informational, honestly, I think. A 2019 U.S. Environmental Protection Agency rule states that manufacturers must seek government approval before selling discontinued uses of asbestos. So you can't, hopefully, find these products that have that were legacy asbestos items without proper government oversight. But there's always bad actors, and someone's going to, try to make a quick buck and probably avoid the regulations since we're anti-regulations in this country. Some discontinued asbestos products that this 2019 rule would oversee and would need government approval to sell. Vinyl asbestos tiles, asbestos cement, asbestos roofing felt, asbestos adhesives, sealants, and coatings, asbestos reinforced plastics. And off to the right on this website, there's a picture of Kentile vinyl asbestos tiles. Oh my God, people, this stuff looks like that vintage, like, those like kind of vinyl tiles that you see in like old, like 50s government office buildings and schools. Like, you know, think like the avocado green, or the seafoam green, floor tiles in the old school. Like, oh, this just screams, ugh, vintage nastiness. Asbestos suppliers and manufacturers. Hundreds of manufacturers use asbestos insulation in steam engines, piping, and locomotives. Insulation, you know, pipes, wires. That's where the asbestos is usually going to be. Thousands of other uses emerged later. Asbestos became common in boilers, gaskets, cement, roofing materials, and automotive brake pads. Leading asbestos companies were Johns Manville, W.R. Grace & Co., Pittsburgh Corning, Armstrong World Industries. And off to the right is a wonderful picture of a Johns Manville brake lining set. So yeah, a bunch of fibers for your brakes. Stop your vehicle. How to identify asbestos products. The only way to identify asbestos is through lab testing or professional inspection. Microscopic asbestos fibers have no smell or taste. Asbestos materials fall into two risk categories. So this one, and there's even pictures to help explain it. I like this. Friable asbestos materials. Ooh, I like that. Okay, I'm all for, like, you know, play on words, like wrapping your mind around something. So friable asbestos, the picture given is, you know, those classic old buildings where they have like the hot water pipe running into the attic or something to go somewhere from the mechanical room, and it's got like that really thick 1-inch insulation on it. The outside's probably like, you know, kind of a plasticky coating, but inside is a bunch of like fibers. There's a solid chance that that's going to be asbestos. So friable asbestos materials are easy to break or crumble by hand. Examples include old asbestos pipe insulation and talcum powders contaminated with asbestos. Remember that whole Johnson & Johnson lawsuit a few years ago? These materials can release toxic dust into the air upon breakage. Oh, that's how it gets into the ovarian, the baby powder. Okay. We learned something together, people. So friable, you can very easily make it airborne. It's, you know, fibrous, and you can peel it off of, like, pick at it. Non-friable asbestos materials are more durable. Examples include asbestos cement slabs and vinyl asbestos tiles. These products keep asbestos fibers trapped as long as the products remain undisturbed. Sawing, scraping, or smashing the product may release the fibers. So these are more of your harder things that as long as you just leave them in place, you're fine. You don't have to worry about it. But if you go, you know, tearing up the roof and these fibers are there, you have to be careful when you start breaking these tiles, because that roof dust could have asbestos in it. So non-friable asbestos materials are more solid and encapsulated. Tips for safely handling asbestos. Some situations require removal of asbestos-containing materials, but it may be safer to leave the materials undisturbed or encapsulate them with a sealant. Consult a certified local asbestos abatement professional for the best advice. Some jurisdictions allow homeowners to remove asbestos materials on their own. Follow these precautions if you are considering DIY asbestos abatement. Some tips for DIY asbestos abatement. Seal off the work area with plastic sheets and turn off the air conditioning. We don't want the air to be moved around. Gonna have to sweat this one out. No air conditioning. Wear a respirator with a high efficiency particulate air HEPA filter. High efficiency particulate air filter. HEPA. HEPA. Wear disposable coveralls and gloves during asbestos work. And also, if you're wearing gloves, make sure that you are very careful when you take them off. You have to be very methodical and measured. Don't just, oh, we're done, rip it all off, throw it. Like, you want to turn things inside out slowly and encapsulate the dust that got on those materials and keep them on those materials and then throw them away in, taped off bags and stuff. Just because you don't want to, throw all that protection out the window just by when you take off the clothes. Use a pump sprayer to keep asbestos materials wet and suppress dust at all times. Excuse me. This is why you see in a lot of like construction places, they do it with the dirt anyway, like when they're doing road construction, but just misting things like once an hour, once every, 30 minutes, whatever. Keeping it wet minimizes airborne particulate matter and can help make this process safer and easier to complete. It stinks, when you think about you have to get the place wet, and obviously you don't want to get it too wet and then you have to dry it out because you could cause mold and stuff. Like that's a whole nother issue, but keep the dust down. That's the biggest thing. Clean the work area with wet wipes or a vacuum cleaner that has a HEPA filter. I would also recommend, if you're using such a setup, when you're done, do a thorough cleaning of the vacuum or dispose of the vacuum, and swap out that HEPA filter. Clean up the insides of the vacuum with something wet so that it doesn't cause any further dust when you're cleaning out the vacuum. But then whatever got attached to the HEPA filter, you don't want to risk that getting back out. So change the HEPA filter after that project. Dispose of asbestos waste in clearly labeled bags at a landfill that can accept asbestos. You can't just throw it into your regular landfill. I know, nobody likes to think about those things. But toxic chemicals and products need to be properly disposed of. We're all guilty of throwing away the batteries, but guess what? You're not supposed to put batteries into the landfill. But, it stinks that you then have to save up all these AA batteries that are dead to, go properly dispose of versus the convenience of, oh, the clock died. Let's just throw it in the trash. Is asbestos banned? Asbestos is not banned in the United States, but it is highly regulated. The asbestos industry has powerful lobbying organizations protecting its profits. Russia, China, India, and Mexico still use the toxic mineral. Safe alternative to asbestos. U.S. manufacturers have phased out the use of asbestos. They now rely on several safer substitutes. And this has some examples of modern replacements that used to be asbestos, but now we use something else. Polyurethane foam is a replacement. Polyurethane foam is cheap and effective for insulation, and construction workers can apply spray polyurethane foam to insulate and seal. This, they use this in those wall cavities. You've probably seen the advertisements. If your house is leaky or, you're wanting to increase your energy ratings, you can spray this foam and it comes out as a liquid, expands on contact, and builds an insulating barrier that keeps air from moving in and out of a building. Amorphous silica fabric. Amorphous silica fabric is a high-quality cloth. It contains almost pure amorphous silica fibers. Like asbestos, the fiber does not rot or burn. So this would be in modern insulations. Again, like a woven fabric is what this is. And silica is a type of sand. So it's basically like melted sand fibers that they weave into an insulator. Cellulose fiber. Again, this is another insulating product. People often spray it into their walls in the garage, insulate something cheaper, pre-existing construction that you can't tear up the wall and, put in some other type of insulation. This is something where they just cut some holes and then you just spray it into each joist cavity. Cellulose fiber contains cotton, wood pulp, linen, and shredded paper. A chemical treatment enhances its properties. And then thermoset plastic flour, basically ground flour, ground plastic that is the consistency of flour. That's kind of interesting to think about. That flour is just basically ground dust, whatever. Like wheat flour is ground dusted wheat. And this is thermoset plastic flour. So it's flour made out of thermoset plastic. Thermoset plastic flour is a mixture of wood fibers and binders. It can contain hardened egg or gelatin and is then ground down. Sounds very biodegradable. Interesting. Coming to a diner near you. Just kidding. I hope the humor is welcome by your ears. If not, you're probably turning the podcast off in a moment. Asbestos cover-up. The history of asbestos extends back to ancient times. In the U.S., the toxic mineral had its heyday in the middle decades of the 20th century. Since asbestos industry began, doctors documented the lethal effects of asbestos exposure. Pretty sure they probably covered it up. Like, oh, couldn't be our mining. Get back to work. As early as the 1930s, businesses hid that asbestos exposure causes lung disease. Asbestos companies profited by selling insulation to shipbuilders during World War II. They expanded their business further during the post-war building boom. These companies paid unscrupulous researchers, such as J.C. Wagner, to deny responsibility. See, and that brings up another thing. Like, I'm always hesitant when I hear, oh, study proves that coffee is bad for you, or study proves coffee extends your life. You always have to look at the totality of the research. Who's paying for it? What is the desired outcome that they may be wanting? If the outcome is something that would benefit their business, that is completely something to take into account. If it's a coffee industry and they're paying for it, and then the study comes out and says coffee determined to be, horrible, then they have everything to lose by the finding of this study. So it's probably more reliably factual versus, some of these studies are designed falsely to garner the results that they're looking for. And then, they get the headlines and people start flocking to these things. But if you don't actually look at the players and the setup of the research, you could be misled down different paths. The phasing out of asbestos. Phasing out asbestos began when significant medical evidence linked asbestos to cancer. Labor unions, those bad unions, began to fight back. American companies phased out most uses of asbestos in the 1980s. By then, it was too late for the workers who had been already handling asbestos products for decades. In the late 1800s, asbestos mining became a major industry to supply fibers for industrial products. 1927, a worker filed the first known workers' compensation claim for asbestos-related disease. In the 1930s, seems like everything started right around the Civil War. Like that's when everything went to shit. Anywho, moving forward. Another podcast for another day. 1930s, asbestos companies researched health effects in secret and kept the results hidden, just like those big old tobacco companies did, 40 years later. 1933, John Manville settled 11 asbestos lawsuits. In the 1960s, medical studies confirmed asbestos caused mesothelioma cancer. In 1973, an asbestos insulator won the first major asbestos lawsuit. There are additional links in this site. National Cancer Institute, Environmental Protection Agency, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, Centers for Disease and Control and Prevention, and the World Health Organization. Make sure I want to read this to you. Asbestos lawsuits. Hundreds of thousands of patients and families have filed asbestos lawsuits. These claims provide much needed compensation to cover medical bills and lost wages. Family members who develop mesothelioma through the secondhand exposure may file a legal claim. People with mesothelioma may also file a claim against the Asbestos Trust Fund. These claims hold the asbestos industry liable for the harm they've caused. They covered up evidence of asbestos' health effects, and for years they continued exposing workers and consumers. So there's a link if you are interested in filing an asbestos lawsuit. You can find that there. Common questions about mesothelioma treatment. So this is obviously only going to pertain for people that have it, think they have it, develop it, whatever. What do I need to know about asbestos and diseases such as mesothelioma? Asbestos is a group of fibrous minerals used to strengthen fireproof materials. Some of this is going to be repetitive. It is inhaled asbestos fibers become trapped in the body. Fibers cause diseases such as mesothelioma, lung cancer, and asbestosis. More than 50 other countries have banned the use of asbestos. Its use remains legal in the U.S. after a complicated history of legislation and regulation. The safest strategy to remove asbestos is to hire a professional abatement company. Compensation for those with a history of asbestos exposure. Mesothelioma lawyers specialize in asbestos litigation. Settlements average $1 million to $2.4 million in compensation for lawsuits. There's other. Let me see if this drops down. Anyway, there's other things. There's like, should I see a doctor if I have been exposed to asbestos? Can I get compensation if I have been exposed to asbestos? Why is asbestos dangerous? All things we've pretty much gone over. So, other related pages: asbestos exposure, manufacturers, products. Let's see what this takes us to. Yeah, pretty much. It does break it down quite a bit further into different categories. Goes more into. Oh, interesting. It goes into different industries, like do-it-yourselfers who perform repairs on older homes and home auto mechanics, handling aftermarket brake pads, clutch lining, are also at risk of exposure to asbestos. And then it talks about automotive parts, brake pads, clutches, hood liners, gaskets, and valves contain asbestos. Shows a picture of a mechanic removing asbestos contaminated dust from brakes, like spraying it, and then the water is dripping off into this container. Another example of tiles and adhesive at one time were made with asbestos. Flooring, ceiling, roofing tiles were commonly made with asbestos. adhesive to lay down flooring tiles has also been a source of exposure. Cement, asbestos-containing cement, was used in building materials because the fibers provided strength without adding much weight. Its insulating and fire resistance properties also made the mineral an ideal substance to add to cement. It shows weathering of cement made with asbestos can expose toxic fibers. So as the cement basically naturally dries and comes off with time, especially if it's exposed to like water and weather movement, those fibers can become exposed with time. Textiles, asbestos was used in the production of clothes and garments for its resistance to heat and corrosive elements. Some of the most common textiles include blankets, firefighter suits, and rope. So again, think of anything that insulates or protects. Insulate, protects, strengthens, stops, high heat situations, breaks. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's 2020 risk evaluation found an unreasonable risk to the health of that other word, chloralkali workers, that chlorine one, who handle raw asbestos to make diaphragms. Ooh, interesting. The asbestos diaphragms work as a filter to produce chlorine and sodium hydroxide. Asbestos reportedly does not end up in the final products, so the agency did not find a threat to customers. In February 2021, the U.S. Geological Survey reported 30% increase in raw chrysolite asbestos importation from the previous year to support the chloralkali industry. So asbestos is still imported for workers that do this work. The use of asbestos-containing products stretched across a number of industries. Most of the products could be categorized as either construction or automotive materials. Gives industrial and commercial asbestos products, adhesives, automotive parts, cement, construction masks and gunning mix, diaphragms, duct connectors, electrical components, felt, fireproofing, gaskets, insulation, laboratory equipment, plastics, cement sheets, textiles, tires, and vinyl products. Common home and consumer asbestos-containing products. Consumers, homeowners, and do-it-yourselfers have been exposed to asbestos in consumer goods and home building materials. Currently, DIY projects in older homes present an exposure risk to homeowners today. Do-it-yourselfers who installed their own insulation and flooring before the 1990s faced a high risk of dangerous asbestos exposure. Consumers of makeup are at risk for exposure to asbestos through the contaminated talc products. Unfortunately, asbestos has been detected in children's makeup in recent years. It has also appeared in children's toys, including crayons, clay, and fingerprint paint kits. Jesus. Home and consumer asbestos products, appliances, cigarette filters. You know, if the tobacco carcinogens weren't enough, there's potentially asbestos in the filter nestled between your lips. Pot holders, ashtray coasters, wicking for gas ranges, fake snow, remember that? Hair dryers, makeup, talcum powder, and zonolite insulation. Again, it just kind of recaps. It's just a different presentation of more in depth, different areas that used it, why they used it. Properties of asbestos. It is abundant. Asbestos occurs naturally in mineral deposits around the world. It is fibrous. Asbestos ore can be pulled apart into a woolly consistency and then worked like any other type of fiber. So it sounds like it's a very delicate mining product that you could smash with your hands and then it becomes dust. How would you, the second you hit this, are exposed to danger. Wow. And we didn't know anything about, the science back in the day when our grandparents and great grandparents just like went into the ground and struck this stuff with, a pickaxe, and then it just shattered on contact and became airborne. They were getting cancer. It is durable. Asbestos is resistant to heat, electricity, and chemical corrosion. It is carcinogenic. Microscopic asbestos fibers are not easily broken down by the human body once they are inhaled. Over many years, large asbestos fibers can cause chronic inflammation, buildup of scar tissue, and cancer. Remember, your lungs are wet. They get stuck. And your body tries to encapsulate. This basically goes into more depth about asbestos products and the banning process. Asbestos products currently banned in the U.S. Asbestos flooring felt, asbestos paper products including corrugated, chemical, and specialty paper, so like cardboard boxes, packing materials. Freeable asbestos pipe and block insulation, spray-on coatings containing more than 1% asbestos. So presumably you could have a legal spray-on coating containing less than 1% asbestos. That's nice. Asbestos wall compound, asbestos fireplace decorations. What the hell is asbestos fireplace decorations? Anyway, there's so many questions in this world. Asbestos filters for pharmaceutical manufacturing. Though asbestos remains legal in the U.S., regulations controls its use and manage its removal from older buildings. We've already gone over all that. Let me take a quick jaunt down the cancer path. How does it cause cancer? Through inhaling. Cannot break down or remove. Oh, and it shows the different how asbestos develops into cancer. Asbestos fibers enter the respiratory or digestive system. So through your mouth or your nose. Laryngeal cancer, that's right where your Adam's apple is, voice box. Mesothelioma cancer, that is in the bottom lining of your lungs. They kind of get stuck into the side. Your body secretes a mucus to try to wash it away, and it goes down to the very pit of your lungs and sits there for the rest of your life. Lung cancer forming on the bronchial tubes. Ovarian cancer, obviously that would come from talcum powders and baby powders that have some asbestos components in them. Symptoms and diagnosis of asbestos-related cancers. Mesothelioma and other cancers from asbestos exposure often take many years to develop. The earliest symptoms can mimic more common respiratory or abdominal cancers. Confirming asbestos-related cancer typically requires a mesothelioma specialist. Symptoms of asbestos cancer. People with a history of asbestos exposure should seek regular health screenings. So if you've worked in an industry where you could have been exposed to asbestos, or you've done something like we've gone over that would expose you historically or whatever to asbestos, you need to be monitoring your health for asbestos-related problems. So people with a history of asbestos exposure should seek regular health screenings. They should pay special attention to the following signs, which may signal cancer. Respiratory system symptoms, shortness of breath, coughing, and chest pain are symptoms of pleural mesothelioma, pericardial mesothelioma, and lung cancer. Digestive system symptoms, swelling and pain, digestion issues, changes in bowel habits, and nausea are symptoms of peritoneal mesothelioma, stomach cancer, colon cancer, and ovarian cancer. reproductive system symptoms, menstrual changes, fatigue, back pain, and pain during sex can be symptoms of ovarian cancer. Throat symptoms, chronic sore throat, persistent hoarseness, feeling the need to clear your throat often, and difficulty swallowing can signal laryngeal cancer and pleural mesothelioma. The path to an asbestos-related cancer diagnosis can be different for everyone, but an early diagnosis allows for many treatment options with more favorable prognosis and improved survival. I know we don't like to talk about having, extra bills and stuff, but the copay to see your doctor and the peace of mind it can afford you and your family is leaps and bounds worth it. Don't ever hold off on going to a doctor. If you feel something, say something, get it checked out. If a doctor says, oh, you're fine, but you still have these weird symptoms, find another doctor. Advocate for yourself. Don't sit there and be like, oh, well, I'm just getting older. It's just how it is. Because when it finally does pop up, it might be too late. So I'm a huge advocate of, spend the copay. You probably have insurance for a reason. Use it. If you don't have insurance, find a way to, get affordable health care. Advocate for affordable health care. Look into Medicaid, Medicare. There's just so many options. Don't worry if you're a financial burden to your family or society or whatever. Like, your life matters and you need to advocate for it. Speak up, say something. We want to see your bright and shiny face. You brighten somebody's day and you need to, keep doing that. So different things to consider during the diagnosis of cancer process. A referral. If a primary care physician suspects a patient has signs of cancer, the patient will be referred to a cancer specialist. Imaging tests, x-rays, CT scans, MRIs, and PET scans can help a doctor look inside the body for tumors or other signs of cancer, such as inflammation. Blood tests. Blood tests look for signs of cancer, such as abnormal blood cell counts. They can also help determine if cancer treatment is effective. Cancer biopsies. Biopsies are tissue samples collected from a tumor. Pathologists use the results to determine the cancer cell type and confirm a diagnosis of asbestos cancer, such as mesothelioma, lung cancer, or ovarian cancer. After a positive diagnosis from a biopsy, doctors treat mesothelioma and other forms of asbestos cancer with surgery, chemotherapy, immunotherapy, radiation therapy, or multimodal therapy, which is a combination of these options. With chemotherapy, the specific drugs used vary depending on the disease site. Immunotherapy has a history of success in lung cancer, and in 2020, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved the treatment for mesothelioma. Clinical trials continue to identify new therapies for asbestos-related cancer. Once a patient is in active treatment, ongoing tests such as blood tests and imaging scans, plus physical evaluations, determine whether the treatment is working or if it's time to consider new options. Here's a video I have not seen. Let's find out what this is. This is a 1 minute 16 video. A mesothelioma survivor discusses her reaction to diagnosis. Her name is Tamron Little.
It really didn't register because I was just like in the twilight zone, and everybody was moving around me and all of these emotions were going on, and I was just felt like I was kind of stuck. Just wow. So they had different people coming in, I believe they had like a grief counselor coming in and giving me all these pamphlets about it. And by that time, I had took a nap and I woke up. My mom and my husband came back. They had papers that they printed off the internet, which even took them into a different dimension because they were just like, oh my gosh. And they were coming in telling me, people don't survive much with this. And they was just giving me all this. And I'm just like, I haven't even heard of mesothelioma. That was the day that my life changed.
So now you can say that you've heard about mesothelioma and know the risk factors and the ways that you can get exposed to the causes of these cancers. I'm not going to drag it on too much further. It goes into the different types of cancers. Like lung cancer kills twice as many Americans each year as mesothelioma. Asbestos exposure is the primary cause of about 4% of lung cancer cases. Most lung cancer cases trace back to smoking, however, and again, right there, go back to smoking. Yes, smoking is bad, but also there's a chance that you're also getting the, carcinogens from the tobacco industry, but also the, if there's asbestos in the filter, you're getting a double whammy. So, who knows if it's big tobacco or big asbestos that's causing that cancer. In 2017, U.S. healthcare providers diagnosed more than 220,000 lung cancer cases. About 63% of patients diagnosed with localized lung cancer live 5 years or more. Conversely, the 5-year survival is 7% for lung cancer patients with late stage or distant metastatic disease. The American Cancer Society estimates there were 526,510 lung cancer survivors in the U.S. in 2016. By 2026, the American Cancer Society expects that number to increase to 673,370. Laryngeal cancer, larynx cancer, also known as voice box cancer, usually is linked to smoking and excessive alcohol consumption. However, inhaled asbestos fibers can also lodge in the voice box as they pass through the trachea or windpipe on the way to the lungs. In 2021, researchers published a study in Modern Pathology analyzing 6 laryngeal cancer case studies of workers with a history of occupational asbestos exposure. The researchers discovered that half of the workers had that's that word again. Chrysotile asbestos fibers near the tumor sites. More than 13,000 cases of laryngeal cancer occurred in 2017. According to the American Cancer Society, a combination of smoking, heavy drinking, and asbestos exposure increases a person's laryngeal cancer risk significantly. Ovarian cancer. Healthcare providers diagnosed ovarian cancer in more than 22,000 American women in 2017. In some cases, a definitive cause is unknown. However, recent medical research has established asbestos exposure as one of the ovarian causes of ovarian cancer. The overall 5-year survival rate for all stages of ovarian cancer is 48%. Patients diagnosed with localized disease have a 5-year survival rate of 93%. This rate decreases to 31% in patients with late-stage cancer or distant metastases. In a 2020 study in the Journal of Occupational and Environmental Medicine, confirmed a definitive relationship between tremolite and anthophyllite asbestos and cosmetic talc products. The research found evidence of the toxic fibers in 80% of ovarian cancer cases caused by personal hygiene products made with asbestos contaminated talcum powder. Court filings show Imerys, Imerys, a major talc supplier for Johnson & Johnson, faced more than 14,000 claims in 2019 from women who alleged asbestos-contaminated talcum powder caused their ovarian cancer. Man, this goes on and on and on. Other cancers associated with asbestos exposure. Let me skim through this real quick. Obviously, asbestos fibers lodge into the soft tissues. We know about all that. Partial evidence has linked asbestos with these cancers. Oh, wait. And many tests again. Okay. So there's possibly other cancers that can come from asbestos. Pharyngeal cancer. The pharynx is a membrane-lined cavity behind the nose and mouth, your sinuses, and connects them to the esophagus in the throat. Air passes through the pharynx and into the lungs. Food and water also go through this area before reaching the esophagus and stomach. A 2020 research report suggests that asbestos is a possible risk factor for cancers involving the upper airways. Inhaled or swallowed asbestos fibers can accumulate in the pharynx and may later cause pharyngeal cancer. Pharyngeal cancer affects 17,000 Americans in 2017. Although linked to asbestos exposure, the main risk factors are smoking and excessive alcohol consumption. Stomach cancer. About 28,000 Americans developed stomach cancer in 2017. Infection with Helicobacter pylori bacteria. Smoking and a diet heavy in salt. Cured meats and preservatives are the main risk factors. In April 2020, a scientific report discovered a positive association between the occupational talc exposure and risk of stomach cancer. Talc without asbestos fibers did not present any significant risk during the study. Researchers have suggested asbestos-contaminated water may contribute to elevated risk of stomach and other gastrointestinal cancers. Industrial pollution and crumbling asbestos cement pipes may contaminate water. Colon cancer. The International Agency of Research on Cancer reports a positive association between asbestos exposure and colorectal cancer. Many studies have specifically linked asbestos with cancer in the colon. There is less evidence linking asbestos to rectal cancer. A 2020 study in the journal Industrial Health measured mortality ratios among asbestos production industries, including cement workers and textile workers. The study found statistically significant risks of colorectal cancer, confirming an association with asbestos exposure. Smoking and excessive alcohol consumption, a low-fiber diet, and a sedentary lifestyle are important risk factors for colorectal cancer. A diet high in processed and red meats also increases risk. These factors are more discussed in length in the Mesothelioma Cancer's Guide to Cancer for Seniors. Oh, anyway, it continues on. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you guys. This podcast will be like 2 hours long. Kidney cancer, esophageal cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, leukemia, bile duct cancer, asbestos cancer treatment, financial aid for cancer patients, and other common questions. Again, asbestos.com/cancer is where you get this section, but asbestos.com has an abundance of resources for you to check out. Totally recommend you take a look at those, see what they look like, and read things for yourself. Share it with your family. Share this podcast with other people too. So really happy that you joined me today, and happy to be sharing something that we know about, but isn't that heavily talked about. It still is a concern. It still is a risk factor in our world. And it's something that's not going to go away, anytime soon. Unfortunately, decisions made in the past still linger today. And as hard as we may not want to acknowledge that, industries that we gave tax breaks to, that we didn't demand they pay their fair share, pulled the asbestos fibers over our eyes, sickened our families, killed our loved ones, contaminated our landfills. This is very political. This is the core of problems in our world. We have to talk about it. We have to hold companies and governments accountable. We have to make sure that decisions today can be defendable and honorable 50 years from now. How are we going to explain to our grandchildren and great-grandchildren why we didn't give a shit about their health and their life? Anyway, thank you for listening. I'm happy to be back with you, sharing some thoughts and content, and I will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Everything with Everett. Connect with Everett and other listeners on Facebook and Twitter at Everett Podcast. Everett would love to hear from you. Share your thoughts by emailing mystory@everettpodcast.com. You can also leave a voicemail or send a text message to 208-391-2808. Choose to listen, speak with kindness, and have a great day.